introduce myself. My name is Nurul Iman. I'm currently an investor relations and data analyst in Capital Boost, and I'm also in the research department of IF@SG covering Shariah and finance. Islamic Finance at Singapore, or IF@SG, is a community of scholars, finance professionals, and students in Islamic finance. What started as a WhatsApp group has now become a society in the making with a long-term goal to serve the Singaporean community through Islamic finance. Tonight, I am honored to share this platform with the representative of Wahed Investment, Izzat Fadil and Shakir Hashim. Can you share about yourself? Maybe we can start with Izzat Fadil.
Sure. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum and good evening to audience, to the host and to organizers. My name is Izzat Fadli. I'm from KL. I'm the country director and also the fund manager for Wahed Invest Malaysia. Previously, I was a fund manager in one of the largest unit trust fund management company here in KL. I also had a short stint in Singapore with Singapore Unit Trust Limited, which was a subsidiary of the Unit Trust fund management company here. And in my 11 years of experience, working experience now, it has always been in equity investment. Started off with managing proprietary fund, and then I managed one of the larger unit trust funds in Malaysia, which is open for mostly Bumiputras to invest in the fixed price funds. Along the way, manage some regional markets such as ASEAN, Asia Pac as Japan, but more than most, I would often manage Sharia compliant equity funds. So for that, I have over 5 years experience already. And now I'm in Wahed Invest Malaysia, where we focus solely in managing Sharia compliant portfolios. And starting off here in Malaysia, and hopefully we can broaden our scope in the region. So that's where I am at the moment.
Thank you so much, Izzat. And next, maybe can you introduce yourself, Shakir?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Iman. Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm Shakir. So I'm originally from Singapore. So now I'm based in KL together with Izzat. At Wahed, I am currently SVP of Business Operations, where I look at driving scale across all country teams in the world for Wahed. Previously, I was the country head for Malaysia, which is also my concurrent role, where I worked with the team to get the Malaysia entity license. So in Malaysia, Wahed is the first and to date the first and the only Islamic digital investment manager licensed by Securities Commission Malaysia. Previously, before I joined Wahed, I had my own fintech company in the crowdfunding space. We built it and it got acquired. And yeah, before that, I studied in NUS. So if there's any NUS folks here, hi. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Shakir. All right. We always hear Wahed Investment, and that we always know that these two things. Wahed Investment is an robo-advisor and also is known to have 20,000 users worldwide, which aims Muslim to understand some of the to understand Islamic finance and also the growth of their wealth. But actually, who is Wahed and how? What is the history of Wahed Investment actually?
Yes, Iman. Cool. Yeah. So Wahed started in 2016, 2017. So the whole story, the whole company started when our group CEO and founder Junaid Wahidna was actually working in New York. So there's this, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but to me, it's quite a famous story. He shared about it multiple times across multiple articles. So what happened was when he was working in New York, one day he jumped into a yellow cab, right, in New York. And the person driving the cab was a Muslim driver. So they shared their salams and all that. So the taxi driver asked Junaid, what is it that you work in? So Junaid mentioned that he worked in investments. Once Junaid shared that he works in investments, the taxi driver started asking a lot of investment related questions like what we're going to have today, but probably more layman.
Yeah.
So, so one of the things that changed how he viewed, or Junaid viewed, the world of retail investments was when the taxi driver said that he one day he went to a mosque, and the imam in his sharahan or ceramah, shared that
Recording in progress.
shared that the imam shared that Apple stocks are Sharia compliant, and that led to the taxi driver investing almost all his life savings into a single type of stock, which is Apple stocks. And that scared Junaid, and even it should scare all of us when we hear any of our family members doing things like that, right? Going all in into one asset class. And this is not only just an asset class, this is a specific stock, the amount of risk that he's taking. So going out of that cap, it was a realization for Junaid, our group CEO, that retail Muslims or everyday Muslims around the world may not have access to quality investment advice, quality investment management service, and there is not many people taking action on a global stage. Like locally, you might have some people doing this and that, but finding a solution to that problem in a scalable manner, that was the gap back in 2016, and I still think it's a gap today. Because of that, our group CEO started to build on this Wahed idea. So in 2017, we launched Wahed in the US, to much excitement to the world and to the US Muslim community. In 2018, we expanded to the UK with much fanfare. And alhamdulillah, in 2019, we also launched our first business in the emerging market, which is in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, we've grown from strength to strength, and we are currently, in terms of client numbers, we are the leading robo-advisor in Malaysia, despite only being around for slightly more than 1.5 years. And we've been very lucky and grateful to have the support of strong shareholders and investors like Saudi Aramco, like Biko Capital Dubai, and Cubal Capital, and a multitude of family offices around the world who align with our mission of democratizing halal investing for the everyday Muslim around the world. That's a little bit about Wahed from me, Iman.
Thank you so much, Shakir. It's so interesting. It's mind-blowing how the history of Wahed come about from cabby driver, the yellow cab driver, and wow, it's mashallah. But I have a question. Wahed basically spread in US, UK area, correct? From there? But according to a survey by Gatehouse Bank in UK revealed that 61% of the respondents were skeptical about how Islamic the bank's product really are. So some of these respondents also lack of knowledge in Sharia finance, yet they conclude in such way. So what is your view on such people? And before that also, does Wahed started off immediately with Sharia compliance product, or how?
Yeah, so we've always been Sharia compliant, and halal has always been our ethos. Like I can safely say we will never stray away from that. We will never go hybrid. Like we live and breathe, the Islamic way and the Sharia way, and there is no compromise from our shareholders all the way down to our management or executives. If one day Wahed ever goes into conventional, I believe with a very strong conviction that many of the strong men or strong women within Wahed will leave, because that is not what we joined Wahed for. So that commitment is definitely there. With regards to the question about that was done in the UK, I think the statistic I don't know what are the environment to which the survey was rolled out. It could be that the question was asked to non-Muslims too. Are you aware about that? Or yeah, so 61% of people saying that they don't really believe in the Islamicness of Islamic products. I'm not too sure about that. What we've seen in the UK is that the take-up has been great, right? But where the Western countries differ from, say, Malaysia, Singapore area, is that Islamic finance is very much embedded into society, right? Because there's a very strong government push. Maybe not in Singapore, but in Malaysia, right? The push by the government to promote Islamic finance, the number of Islamic finance schools, the number of Islamic finance graduates, that all those play a part in awareness and education to the public, right? But this ecosystem that we have in Malaysia, Singapore, where we have graduates coming back from Islamic finance institutions, this may not be as prevalent in the Western countries, right? So that might have played a part. Maybe Izzat, you have any additional points to that?
Sure. I actually saw that survey. So that 61% actually came from a sample of respondents that originally has no interest in Islamic finance anyway. So that's where their skepticism comes from. I think at the end of the day, wherever you are, uh, awareness of
Yeah.
Islamic finance has to be built up, and it, there are a lot of misconceptions just by
Yes.
comparing side by side with conventional finance lah. So whenever you talk about Islamic finance, people always say that people that are not familiar with Islamic finance will say that it's probably a religious product. So that is what
Yeah.
making them straying away from Islamic finance. And they're also saying, probably things like it's only for Muslims. The Islamic finance is merely sort of a replication of conventional finance and things like that. But there are a lot. It's a lot more complicated than that. We have a lot more. We have a lot of scholars that are in the field, in both Shariah and which is the ethical legal standard, and also Islamic finance that have contributed to the development of Islamic finance as we know. And what we need to sort of uh, improve on is just to increase and spread the awareness at the basic level, so that people understand what is it about. Islamic finance is more than just its name. It's about way of life. It's about changing from riba to trade, and just simplifying the complex core messages of Islamic finance. I think that would help a lot in bridging the knowledge gap lah, between those who are not in the know and those who are already trying to further advance the industry lah.
Yes, exactly. Macam, because like basically when we want to when basically we understand this like equation of this demand and supply. So this demand from the people, in order for them to actually go and search for Islamic finance, needs to start off with creating awareness. And that's totally right. Like, need to spread the knowledge and the importance of Islamic finance, and making Islamic finance the way of life, and not just looking it as, or just like financial, something to do with growing of money, but a bigger picture is the way of life. Yes, that's true. Now, let's jump to the question. When we talk about Wahed investment, we know that it actually involves with global equities, emerging market stocks, suku, gold, cash. So for Singapore, we have been always used to know about index funds, right? So when we talk about Wahed Nasdaq ETFs, maybe what can we explain to the layman? I mean, what is ETFs? And then what is the difference between Wahed investment, Nasdaq ETFs, and the options that is given, like the global equities, emerging marketing stocks, and Sukuk, gold, cash? Maybe Brother Izzat or Brother Shakir?
Sure, I can take that question. So, ETF is basically a basket, a security that unitize the underlying stocks lah. So, ETF usually tracks a particular index or particular sector. So, imagine S&P index has 500 stocks. So an ETF of that would have a weight of that 500 stocks, and they allow you to purchase it through a particular exchange lah, for example, the US exchange. So what we have with Wahed is the Wahed FTSE Halal, Wahed FTSE USA Shariah Index, which is the ticker HLAL, halal, and that tracks basically the Sharia compliant S&P 500 stocks. So from the 500 securities, our Sharia board screens for Sharia compliance, and those that pass the quantitative and qualitative screening, I think it's about 200, 220 stocks, would then form the basis of this halal ETF lah. So with that, you can one can purchase it over Nasdaq, and holding one stock of or holding one unit of halal means that you're basically tracking the performance of Sharia compliant S&P 500. So there's a lot of other ETFs available, but of course, for Wahed, we sort of saw this gap whereby there's no Islamic ETF in the US, and that is why we created that for the benefit of, firstly, for our US platform, but then obviously for others not in the US, like for Singaporeans, for UK, you can also purchase it using your brokers lah. Yeah, so that is that's the basic of exchange traded funds. Yeah.
All right. So when you are explaining to us about making sure that the ETFs are specifically Sharia compliant, hence the question is, in January 2020, we believe that Wahed has appointed Sharia Review to manage Sharia compliance. SRB has been known to publish guides on complex products such as derivatives and cryptos for those new to Islamic finance or only know some of the product. Could you describe the behind scene of how heavy lifting done by your team and SRB to ensure all products are fully Sharia compliant?
Okay, sure. Yeah, SRB is quite a well-known Sharia compliance board. Yes, they do complex products as well, but for Wahed at this point in time, we are dealing with the simpler products, which is funds, ETFs. So the complexity level is way lower. So because we already have the Sharia screening done by Yasar Limited, which is the Sharia compliance team. So in terms of behind the scenes, the SRB comes in to make sure that all of our underlying funds that we use are Sharia compliant. When we talk about underlying funds, all of these funds actually have their own Sharia certification that's given by different Sharia teams or Sharia boards. So at the end of the day, what we want to do is align between SRB and also the underlying funds Sharia board, so that we are all following the same standards. As we know, because there is no one standard Sharia certification that is issued by a leading authority anywhere, so we have to sort of align between one fund with the Sharia board that we appoint. So that is where SRB comes in. Not only that, I think at the end of the year, they also advise on purification reports. Yeah, and they also come in whenever we have certain advice that we seek regarding not just funds, but also in terms of operational, in terms of as I mentioned before, the communication with clients, whether it be in the form of purification or probably zakat and you know, and those line items. So that's where SRB responsibility comes in regards to the overall operational matters of Wahed. Yeah.
Hence, we can say that Wahed actually has an exposure. I mean, it has a broader exposure to international markets, right? Which is also already screened, and it's already we can have the trust that we are investing into a Sharia compliant stocks. Can we also define ETFs as stocks, securities?
ETF is essentially a fund. So
it's a fund.
Yeah, it's a fund. It's a fund that holds many stocks.
Okay.
So and then you have Sharia compliant ETF, which is a fund that holds many Sharia compliant stocks.
Yeah, all right.
But
so maybe that's the confusion that people always have when they start talking about ETFs. Is it bond? Is it stock? Or you know, that idea will come out.
Sure.
You know?
Okay. That
because
is a
bond
good question.
because people will always say bond is not halal. You know those stuff. So how can ETF become halal if they understand bond is as the same concept as ETFs? You know? So how do we
Yes.
explain actually?
Sure. Okay, so I understand where the confusion comes in. So at the
Yeah.
end of the day, what ETF is still a fund. It can still be an equity fund. It can be a bond fund. So it can be an equity ETF or a bond ETF. But at the end of the day, it's a fund, and what you have to look is the underlying stocks or the underlying security. So when we are talking about equity ETF, then you're talking about ETF that only holds equity. So it doesn't have any bond component, doesn't have any uh, other asset class component. So it only holds equity. So
Mm.
when we want to search for a Sharia compliant ETF, then you look first at equity ETF,
Mm.
and then you make sure that equity ETF tracks the Sharia compliant benchmark.
Mm. So the whole
So
thing becomes
then
Sharia compliant.
yes,
Yes,
so
it's
yeah.
interesting.
So
Okay, it's easy.
in
All
the
right.
future, if in the future if the product becomes available, then you will have Sukuk ETF, which
Mm-hmm.
then tracks a benchmark of Sukuk. So that will then means that it is an Islamic bond ETF.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you have certain like reservations of previously not investing in bonds, then you can go for Sukuk ETF when it is available. Yeah.
Wow, mashallah. Maybe Wahid can have the initiative to have the Sukun ETFs, inshallah, in the future. All right. So, thank you so much. It's a very clear explanation now between ETFs and then the stocks and also bonds concept. After all, we understand that ETF is actually a fund, and this fund is actually under the equity. Hence, after going through the Sharia screening, the whole ETF will be under the Sharia compliant that we can actually look into to invest. And all right, the next question is the special feature about Wahed. It's a robo-advisor. All right, let me just explain my understanding of robo-advisor, and maybe if I'm wrong, correct me. So robo-advisor is actually an autopilot where instead of we having to DIY and do research and etc. of the financial before we invest or before we seek for financial advisors advice, we can actually have this robo advisor that can actually give us our choose of risk appetite accordingly. So we can choose accordingly. Are we risk aggressive or we are not that so risky? You know? So we can choose from there. Is it right? How we look into robo advisors in Wahed concept?
Um, I mean, at the end of the day, it's close. So instead of choosing what the robo advisor will give in the first place is a set of questions. So that set of question is basically to understand or who you are in terms of your age, your source of income, your appetite to investment or
Mm-hmm.
your basically your risk level. So from those information, then the robo advisor will suggest a portfolio that is suited to your risk tolerance. So for example, if you're still young and you have relatively higher income, uh, and your attitude towards investment
Risk
is
taker.
very, yeah, it's a risk taker, then obviously the robo advisor will then lead you towards a more aggressive portfolio.
So
Of
the
course,
uh-huh.
yeah. So I think of course as you age and as your situation change, then you would, I mean, on your own you would then go and redo the questionnaire,
Mm.
and then you will find that that the answer will then be different, because as you age, you tend to be less risk taking, and you'll probably be a more moderate investor or even a conservative investor that focuses on income rather than growth. So when or after the client goes through this process, a portfolio is suggested, after which they can still choose to invest in other types of portfolios. But then when you do that, you choose it knowing that you are a bit straying away a bit from your actual risk tolerance lah. Yeah, so and the app will then allow you to invest in the funds available, and then as and when it needs rebalancing, the app will then do it on your behalf. So it's like you mentioned earlier, it's sort of an autopilot. investing.
But
Yeah.
I have just a curiosity. So when it's like autopilot, robo-advisor, so it's zero human intervention.
Between the client and the application, yes, is zero human intervention.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so interesting. Okay, so being that said, how actually Wahed are able to keep annual management fees low from 0.2 to 1%, and there's no sale charge to like contrast to this charge with the mutual funds available in the market. Like we know it's already robo-advisor, so how can actually you guys have a very low cost charge and there's no sales charge?
It's a combination of a few things. Firstly, because it's a digital platform,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a lot of cost is taken out from there lah, because
Uh-huh.
from a business perspective, usually the operating expense, a lot of that comes in paying salary to to your staff lah. When you do it digitally, then you cut a lot of or you don't have a lot of expenses. You can only focus on developing your application and focusing on the technology. And the other thing is in terms of the funds that we use as well. So in general, ETFs are actually low cost. Because you can purchase it over using your broker, then most of the time you're only paying your brokerage rate, which is much lower than what the mutual funds charge for you to start investing in them. Of course, the strategy is also different. The way ETF is able to do it is because it is a form of passive investment. It only aims to track the benchmark, whereas mutual funds usually employ active management. So you're paying a bit of premium there because you're basically paying for a more hands-on approach lah. You're paying the fund managers to
Manage
select
your money.
select stocks,
Uh,
attempt to outperform certain benchmark. You're also paying a bit to the researchers that research the stocks, and probably to some goes to the economies that ties the whole thing together. So whereas when you do it with ETF, generally it's more for passive investment. It's more for long term. You're not trying to beat any benchmark. You are simply riding the growth of the market as a whole. Which, when we look historically, you look over the last 10 or 20 years, the market generally tends to go up. Of course, over the years, it will have ups and downs. But the mindset that we need to have when investing is that it's a long-term proposition.
the longer the
Yeah, the
higher.
longer the better. Return is compounded. You're not trying
Yeah.
to time the market, especially because nobody is perfect in timing the market. You always hope to buy low and sell high,
Market
but
is uncertain. Yeah.
yes, and that's not always the case. And a lot of people also do not have the time to research stocks and to look at the market day in, day out, to follow the price. So robo-advisors is a good alternative to have. It's a complementing product with whatever that is out there at the moment, and those combinations have allowed us to sort of keep the fees low.
Right. Thank you so much. With that, let's go to the next question, where most Singaporeans has been asking, because every time we make like talks and etc., the first question people will be like saying, when is in any idea when Wahed will be in Singapore? Is there any plan that Wahed will be in Singapore? Because we understand that after the launching of Wahed in 2017 back then in US, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, the next year the app rolled out concurrently. It took 2 years for Wahed to get the license to operate in Malaysia. Okay, around the same time last year, Wahed received US 25 million funding from Saudi Aramco and stated ambitious of getting regulatory approval in 20 countries. Is Singapore one of them?
Yeah.
Brother Zakir?
Yeah. So I think for the Southeast Asian region right now, our immediate focus is definitely Malaysia, and the next market that we are tackling is actually Indonesia, because Wahed is a tech company, right? So for all tech companies, what we tend to look for is scale, and we want to create as much impact as possible whenever we open up a market. So Malaysia was our natural choice because of the awareness of Islamic finance amongst the Muslim community in Malaysia. Indonesia is undeniably the largest, the country with the largest Muslim population.
Yeah.
The largest Muslim country, right? The country with the largest Muslim population is India. So it's Indonesia is something that we cannot ignore. So given that we have US, UK, Malaysia, and inshallah Indonesia, and recently, we talk about Saudi Arabia that we're going to launch. So, and we have a few other countries in the Africa region that we also are looking for, and Middle East. So I think for every region, we pick a couple of markets that we focus on. I think in the very short term, the focus for Southeast Asia will be Malaysia, Indonesia. We're trying to find ways where we can serve, pockets of Muslim communities in Muslim minority countries through a central location. So in the past, some Singaporeans would realize that it was possible for them to invest with Wahed through our Mauritius operations. But we've put that on hold because of the friction that clients had to go through onboarding to Wahed Mauritius. So we're trying to improve that, make it, make the user experience better, and inshallah in the slightly beyond the short term, we can continue serving Muslims or users in Singapore or in other countries where Muslims are minorities, or the population is not that big. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. So for the Singaporean investor, so the answer is there, inshallah.
But just a caveat, you still can invest into our ETF.
Yes.
So nowadays, I think DBS has a brokerage through the DBS app. There's like Saxo, there's interactive brokers. Investing has become so much more accessible, and you can always look up the HLEL ETF on these international brokers, and cost on trading these US stocks, I think it's like 6 basis points on this digital broker. So the cost of investing into the Wahed ETF is very low through the brokers, and that is a possibility if you want to do it like on Monday when the market opens. That's possible.
Bro Shakir, maybe when you keep saying about broker, people will be getting like confused. Now, who is broker?
Okay. So when Izzat was explaining about Wahed, the portfolio management service, that comes with the app, the Wahed app that we have. So the Wahed app is only available in a few countries, right? Right now it's only US, UK, and Malaysia. So right now, if you're a Singaporean, you download the app, you will realize that you can't open an account because we're not in Singapore yet. We're not regulated. So that's why you can't access the Robo-advisor. But on top of having a Robo-advisor business, as we've discussed just now, Wahed also has an ETF business where we launched the first Islamic equities ETF on the Nasdaq. So Nasdaq is a globally accessible market, right? So you as a Singaporean, because you cannot access the Wahed app, an alternative for you would be to go and sign up to one of the digital brokers that are properly licensed in Singapore. I gave some names just now. The DBS app has a brokerage. There's Saxo Markets. There's interactive brokers. These three are based in Singapore. So open an account with them and then get access to Nasdaq. Just search HLEL ETF, you'll find it, and you can just buy that ETF that we have created and listed on the Nasdaq. And that could be your first foray to Islamic investing into Islamic US equities.
All right. So that's so much clearer right now on Wahed Nasdaq ETFs. So you guys out there, so there's no worry. You can just go to the broker that has been mentioned just now, and then go to the Nasdaq, and then they has the list of ETF that has already been ready from Wahed, correct? All right. So now the question is, after we have understood that Wahed investment is completely Shariah compliant, okay, through the understanding of Izzat just now when he explains. Now let me just like when we talk about this investment, because one of the products that is listed in ETFs, okay, it is related to oil, it's related to environment sectors. All right. So these sectors contradict a bit from the SDG, from the sustainability development, environment friendly. So how do we combat this conflict between Sharia and SDG when Wahed is listing during the ETFs listing? I mean, yeah.
Sure. So when we look at we're talking about ESG, right? Environment,
Yeah,
sustainable and governance. So o-
the
is
gas
it,
and oil
yeah.
sectors, yeah.
So when we look at the global Islamic index providers, so we are talking not just about FTSE, which we use, but also MSCI, Dow Jones, S&P, uh,
Maybe
ESG
we'll
is
talk about FTSE a bit later.
yeah. So
Yeah,
so what
yeah.
I'm trying to say is that these Islamic index providers, uh, uh, the universe at the moment, they don't currently like prioritize environmental considerations.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Although at the end of the day, we know that the Islamic goal is to
Mm-hmm.
preserve resources that is bestowed upon us for every generation, right? But at the moment, it's not prioritized. So you will see that in all of these Islamic indices, there will still be energy sectors, which are mostly oil and gas,
Mm-hmm.
and materials, which is basically all the aluminums and all the mining companies. Because at the end of the day, those are still core businesses that we have globally. Uh, uh, but when we try to look at the commonalities between ESG and not just ESG but also SRI, socially responsible investing, with Sharia, there's a lot of commonality. So we avoid investing in businesses that produces alcohol, that produces that is involved in gambling and so on. But there are still small differences between them, whereby when we talk about the difference between Sharia investing and SRI or ESG investing and SRI is a bit more. The screening is a bit more, is a positive screening, means that you will include those stocks that has positive ESG or positive SRI, whereas Sharia compliant is a negative screening. So you exclude stocks that don't invest in certain products. Sorry, that don't have that have businesses in certain things like riba, maisir, and so on. So of course, a lot of index providers now, they try to marry these two. They try to have a Sharia compliant ESG product or Sharia compliant SRI product. So that is where I think the as the awareness of environment, governance, sustainable increases, the uh, the the combination of both the Sharia universe and the ESG universe will then create future products that would then satisfy the need of investors that that would want to invest in companies that are more environmental friendly, that are more focusing on sustainable goals, that are more
Mm-hmm.
focusing on good governance. But as it stands currently, as I mentioned earlier, the mainstream Sharia universe, they don't currently prioritize environmental considerations. But of course, as you know, it's always an ongoing development. Of course, this is something that the Sharia scholars would then have to convene, discuss. But of course, we are not Sharia scholars, so so what
Yeah.
the future holds, inshallah, I think the marrying of the two would then be a best of both worlds lah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe for the audience to understand, basically, to go through, like we have said, like how do we know certain product is Sharia compliant or not Sharia compliant? We will go through screening, and to go through screening, there are a few benchmark that we follow through. So there are a few such as FTSE, such as S&P, and all this. So they will have different benchmark. And as Izzat has mentioned, Okay, most of them do not marry the environment and also the Sharia component together yet, but inshallah in the future there will be changes and there will be improvement towards that. But okay, so going back to that question also about the FTSE, okay, we know that there are a lot of benchmark or a lot of there are different types of like screening, right? We can go to the IOFI, we can, but how do Wahed choose to be using FTSE instead of the other benchmark or the other uh, strategies that is in the market for screening?
Okay, I think FTSE already has its own global equity Sharia index series. So that's a good starting point. So from that FTSE Global Equity Sharia series, then you then carve out the US portion to get the FTSE USA Sharia Index. So that is where we come in and say we want to partner with FTSE to have this as an ETF to then be listed in Nasdaq lah. Another thing is because the consultant or the Sharia board for the index is Yasar Limited, which is a globally known Sharia consultant, and they are known as being both impartial and also school neutral, means that they don't represent any major Sharia schools of thought. So
Oh,
this then gives a good level of best practices approach, because you can then tap on a lot of good things from other school of thoughts to then create or develop your framework for investment. And FTSE also uses, in terms of the quantitative screening, it uses asset base. So this gives a more good measure, because you compare with Dow Jones, right? I mean, I'm just doing
yeah, yeah.
a quick
The comparing
comparison.
of indices.
Dow Jones uses, yeah, Dow Jones screening uses the trailing market capitalization. So when you use market cap is heavily influenced by the movement of the stock price. So the lower the stock price, then the market cap becomes lower, and then suddenly your denominator becomes very big, and you are deemed as Islamic Sharia compliant. Whereas FTSE uses asset base, so asset doesn't change a lot through time, especially when we look at when they do the review. So usually index providers review their index every semi-annually, so twice a year. So in terms of asset, they don't change as much. Whereas, when we talk about market cap, it can change a lot within a year, given the financial market situation and whatnot. So this gives a level of comfort that the underlying stocks will not change drastically whenever they do the review. So in terms of business screening, financial ratio screening, a lot of this filter is the same between one index provider with the other. So it's just, the what the denominator is, as well as uh, uh, the recognition that we have with Yasar Limited, which is the consultant for the index.
So interesting, I guess, like because people will usually have this idea of FTSE is an indexes where they have big difference of higher accounts. I mean, they have a bit different when it comes to higher accounts, receivables and cash thresholds. So it's interesting that we understand that actually the reason, I mean, the core reason to the choosing of FTSE is actually because it's asset based, right? It's asset based and it's also the market cap is not volatile. I mean, it can be certain at times, right?
The market cap does not influence the screening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because it's more to asset base.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. All right. So, um, that being said, also, maybe we can talk about the performance of ETFs itself. So after understanding about the Shariah compliance, after understanding about why we choose FTSE as the index for ETF screening. So the ETF has also performed remarkably well. Year-to-date data shows the ETF gaining 9.30%. To what can this growth be attributed to? So after knowing a few factors about Sharia compliance and also the indexes, maybe is
Sure.
there Shakir?
Generally, the US market as a whole has reached a lot of all-time highs this year. When you look at S&P 500 and even the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which are the two main indices for the US market, and that has been because of we are coming out of COVID-19. Businesses are coming back. Economic indicators have improved. Even the jobs situation in the US have also improved. Directly that has also affected the performance of the local stocks, especially the sectors that we are heavily involved in. So Wahed is, I think the top two sectors are technology and also healthcare. So of course technology, have increased a lot over the last 12, 24 months, even the last 5 years, due to the record earnings by the big companies, the Adobe, Alphabet, even Apple, and so far until year to date is still pushing the index higher and also pushing the ETF higher. And then secondly, the healthcare sector, when we look at it, of course, we are coming out of COVID. A lot of companies are involved in the manufacturing, distribution of the vaccines, and these have also pushed up their earnings, and of course, that directly impacts the stock price as well. We are also still being supported by the Federal Reserve in the US. Of course, recently last week they said that they will need to wait for direction from the market before they start to tighten the interest rate, which caused a certain volatility in the market. But as of now, we are still thinking that the market is still supported by easy monetary policy. Last week, the US government also introduced infrastructure bill, and that will certainly help the local materials company, local construction companies, and again directly impacts the stock market as well. So we are seeing a lot of multi-year highs for the US market, and this directly influence the direction of the halal ETF as well. Having said that, halal ETF does not have any financials stocks. It doesn't have again the stocks that are not permissible to be included in the Sharia screening. So hopefully this can cushion any future impact that any future sell down might have in the ETF, because as we know, financial is also a big component of the conventional market, and usually whenever Federal Reserve or interest rate move, they will move first, and that will heavily impact the stock market. And because halal ETF does not have it as one of the sectors, we would hope that this can be a good thing for the ETF. Yeah.
So once again, is that so you mean that the influence of the growth towards the conventional ETFs is due to the interest? Is that how it is?
The conventional ETF and the conventional market also have a financial component in it. So of course, because the market as you can see, the financial stocks, even though we are in a low interest rate environment, some of them are still registering good growth. Because there's a lot of products in financial stocks, and that has also helped the conventional market and the conventional index push the broader index higher. What I'm saying is that whenever if there are bad news, so to speak, that can influence the financial sector, it will not be felt by halal index, halal ETF, because halal does not have any financial uh, uh, ba- uh, any banks or any financial institutions, by just by the fact that it's a Sharia compliant ETF, and we screen those financials out of the ETF.
All right, all right.
So that's why I say, if let's say there
So
is
we can
a
see the
future
halal
sell down,
safer,
it can be cushion, but of course, people will always argue it both ways. You don't get the benefit of the financial
higher
sectors.
risk. Yeah,
You don't get the higher, but
it's
also
a
at the end
higher
of the
risk.
day, you are also protected from any heavy sell down that can happen, because that's triggered by this financial sector. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Maybe Brother Shakir, we have a question. What is because Apple is under because let's go back to the story of the history. The cabby said that he actually invested the whole money to Apple company, right? So why do we consider and how does Wahid consider Apple under ETFs of Nasdaq?
So Apple, like, so your question is why?
I mean,
Sorry, sorry.
why Apple is
Yeah.
what makes Apple such an Islamic stock, and can retail investors simply buy this stock knowing that it is available in the Islamic indices?
Like, why is Apple stocks in the Islamic indices in
Yeah.
halal? Okay. I think that's something that we have to accept from the way that FTSE built its index, right? So how FTSE builds it is they have like the world index, right? And as a subset of the world index is the FTSE USA index. And as a subset of the FTSE USA index, they brought in YASAR, the Sharia advisors to FTSE, to screen that FTSE USA index. As Izzat mentioned, it's a negative list process where you take out non-Sharia compliant stocks. So they look at the entire FTSE USA index, they take it out. And throughout this process, Apple seems to have survived, right? Because it has passed the qualitative and quantitative Sharia screenings. So Wahed has not doesn't have a big influence as to whether Apple is included or not. Our fund managers can definitely put in a word to take out a certain type of stock, but we tend to prefer to stay with the index providers' decisions, because they are the ones who are doing the heavy lifting when it comes to the research and index construction. And for that reason, Apple is still included. I don't know if you have anything else to add, is that onto that?
Yeah, and we when we see other Islamic index providers as well, as Shakir mentioned, Apple also kind of survived the screening. So yeah, I think we understand that in the business line of Apple, there is credit card, there is certain interest bearing revenues that they have, but at the end of the day, the Sharia filter deems that as it doesn't as long as the revenue coming out from this line of business is not more than a certain percent, then they're Sharia compliant. So what we then do for at least for Wahed clients is that, even though let's say Apple survives the screening and it is in the ETF, at the end of the year we still do purification to our clients. So when we do purification to our clients, for example, FTSE says that you can still have 5% of your income coming from non-compliant activities or
Mhm.
interest. So what we say is that on an annual basis, investors receive a certain amount of dividend. Let's purify 5% of the dividend, because dividend comes directly from the business. It's from excess profit of the business. So when you do that, you can be assured that the income that you get from the ETF is 100% Sharia compliant, because you on top of the screening that is done in the ETF, at the end of the year, we still do a 5% cleansing of the dividend,
Mhm.
and that takes away the remaining non-Sharia income of the underlying stocks that we have lah. So yeah, so that's how we do it
So the
for the
dividend, the
benefit of
payoff
clients.
is all being done by Wahid side, right?
Yes. So
Yes.
when we
Okay.
receive the dividend distribution from the ETF, we will calculate 5%, and then we will cleanse the 5% and we'll give the remaining 95% of the dividend to clients. And again, reiterating that 5% is because the filtering done by Shariah allows this 5% non-compliant income to be included. So we then purify it first, gives 95% of the dividend back, and you can be assured that all of your income then is 100% compliant.
MashaAllah. All right. Thank you so much, Izzat. And maybe we would like to also know what should an investor look out, all right, before they invest in an ETF. Brother Shakir, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So, well, if you're talking about an Islamic investor, I think first and foremost, if you are constructing your own portfolio, and you're not a specialist at it, I think it's good to get support and advice. Right, Wahid is not in Singapore, so there are many financial advisors and so on that can help you construct a portfolio, and that will be one of the better ways, and you get good advice. But if you are feeling like you want to DIY the whole process, I think it's good to study and first identify the universe of Islamic ETFs available out there. There are not many. So, like if I were to do it personally, I'll look at what Wahid has, I'll look at what iShares has for Islamic ETFs, and I will pick what are the certain exposures that I want. So, I think for now, Wahid only has that US equities ETF listed on the Nasdaq. And then if you are feeling more, emerging markets world, there's also the iShares MSCI ETFs that are, I think, traded out of the London Stock Exchange. So first identify the universe, what is available out there, and maybe get professional advice to allocate. You don't want to go all in into a certain asset class, because that will mean more volatility to your net worth or your income, because you are putting all your eggs in one basket, right? If let's say the only thing you invest in is the Wahed halal ETF, I wouldn't say that's a smart thing, because what if the US economy tanks and you put your entire retirement fund into the halal ETF? That's not a smart way to do it. So identify what are the available ETFs and decide on the asset allocation. Wahed is not available in Singapore, unfortunately, but I think it's good to get advice. And secondly, if you want to be more, you know, intricate in your process, you can do a bit more research on the ETFs that you are buying, right? What's the size? How long has it been around, right? Most of the Islamic ETFs, they are still very new, so you'll see that they are probably less than 5 years old. I think Wahid's ETF is about 2 years old almost. Then iShares is slightly older than that. And then you have a newer ones also that are listed in the US. So the longer they are, basically gives you the comfort that they are more stable, right? And then secondly is to look at the performance of the ETF, right? In the purpose of buying an ETF, more often than not, when it's equities, is to track a certain benchmark. So how successful have they been in tracking the benchmark? All right. So you can look at that by looking at the difference between the ETF price and the net asset value of the ETF. So the closer the price to the NAV means the more successful the fund manager has been when it comes to really tracking the benchmark. And lastly, you should also look at the number of underlying stocks within the ETF. So like Izzat mentioned, the halal ETF that Wahid launched on the Nasdaq has over 220 individual Sharia compliant stocks, right? And that's good diversification. So for example, for the sake of uh, you know a mental exercise. For example, an ETF, a Sharia ETF only has two stocks, Boeing and Airbus, right? And then suddenly there is like two back-to-back plane crashes concerning Airbus and Boeing, right? Airbus and Boeing stocks are going to go crashing down, and so will your ETF, because your ETF only has two stocks. But if your ETF has 222 stocks, whatever happens to Airbus, assuming the Airbus is part of the 222 underlying stocks, will not have a material impact to the performance of your ETF, at least in the short term. So looking at how diversified your underlying funds, underlying stocks are, would be also a meaningful way to justify your choice to a specific ETF. So those are some of the tips that I have, Iman.
All right.
Yeah.
Before anything, we have a question from the public. where do we start is learning Islamic finance from, and any books to recommend? Okay. So it was like a continuous from Shakir advice for us to educate ourselves and to educate. The most important thing before we invest, we need to educate. Hence, maybe you can answer this question, or maybe both of you could answer this question.
Yeah.
Any preference book, any favorite book that we can share with our audience today?
I'm whenever people come to me about this, I recommend them influencers or videos that they can watch. I personally recommend Dr. Dawood's, Dr. Abu Bakar's Facebook page, YouTube channel. He explains things in a very layman way. So to my Malay-speaking family members, having a premier Sharia scholar talking or explaining stuff like ETF. I think Dr. Dawood has a video about ETF where he explains it in Malay. I don't know how he does it, but he explains it so well, and I use it as a tool to share with my family members to explain such a, I wouldn't say it's a sophisticated product, but it's just sophisticated to the layman.
Yes.
So I think videos by scholars that are recognized would be a good start. I personally do not have a book recommendation, but whenever I speak to people, I tend to recommend certain influencers and videos that they have, because that will be a quickest way for non-financially, because if very few people really like to read, right? Most people is like, my job is as an entertainer, but I have extra $10,000. I just want to know where to invest. You don't want to be spending an entire month reading about it. So these bite-sized videos really help quicken that awareness process lah. I don't know, Izzat, do you have any books in your mind?
Specifically on Islamic finance, not really. I think what's good about the digital age now is that you can access a lot of professional papers. So for those who want to dig deeper into not just the ETF asset class, but also difference between Sharia compliant investing and conventional investing. There are a lot of available research papers out there. It's hard for me to recall any of the titles, but most of them are published from our local Islamic universities, from UIA and the International Islamic University in Malaysia. And their research, you can find a broad range of subjects, not just from the not just from the Islamic finance perspective, but also from the Sharia perspective. So they talk a lot about why certain index providers approach their filtering in certain ways and so on. So yeah, these are all you can search it via Google. Again, book recommendation. I don't have one specifically on Islamic finance, but the one that I'm currently trying to finish right now is Misquoting Muhammad by Jonathan A.C. Brown. I don't know whether any of you have read it. So it basically looked at how the revealed scripture, which is Quran and Sunnah, is translated across time, and how that has impacted certain a lot of the sectors, including financial sector. So it's a more broader topic, but maybe one that can interest any of the audience. Yeah, but aside from that, as Shakir mentioned, in Malaysia we have a lot of scholars that you can view their Facebook videos. They also have we also have an official exchange video channel that focuses on Islamic investing as well. So again, all of this you can Google, easily accessible. Just probably take 5-10 minutes of your time, and it can give you a lot more information in a bite-sized manner, as opposed to trying to read and decipher from reading a book.
Right. Thank you so much, Iza. Thank you so much, Shakir. So today has been like, mashallah, we have a very clear view on Wahed investment, specifically Nasdaq ETFs, And to those outside there that has been curious, is it halal and not? We have heard from the representative themselves, okay, that it's halal. It's under food say Sharia compliance screening, and then we know that ETF specifically means that it's fund. It's not that there's no more confusion if it's bond and etc. It's basically funds that is under the equity, and then it has an underlying securities, and then it also undergo a Sharia screening, and specifically the Sharia screening that is being used by Wahed Investment is actually FTSE, and they have the reason being that it's less it is more stable because it's focused on assets, okay. And also from the advice that Shakir had gave us before we start investing in ETFs, we need to identify the universe, we need to seek guidance, and remember we must not put our eggs, the investing in one basket, and then we need to do our research and look for the underlying stocks, and yep, that's about it. And we really thank Bro Shakir and Bro Izzat for the time, and I believe that there's a lot more that you would like to share with us, but the time is not on our side. We at IFSG, we often receive do look out on IFSG space for the next episode for More Than Just Money series, where all your curiosity will be answered. So once again, thank you to all the participants. Thank you, Izzat. Thank you, Shakir. Okay, and see you. And good night and stay safe. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.